So I've had a bad financial year. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind where your lifestyle changes, but your pride hasn't necessarily caught up yet. And if you've ever had to shrink your life in private while everyone else thinks you're fine, this conversation is for you. There's something very humbling about having a bad financial year. Not the kind where you just overspend and promise to do better next month. I'm talking about the kind where life actually shifts. A business slows down, a contract ends, a relationship changes, a decision doesn't work out as well as you thought it would. And suddenly you're adjusting everything. The trips stop, the lifestyle shrinks, and for me personally, the hardest part wasn't even the money. It was the internal adjustment I had to face. Because I've had 2 years where financially I had to readjust. I had to cut back, I had to move differently, I had to become more intentional. And let me tell you, when you're used to building, expanding, progressing, that kind of slowdown can feel like failure. But honestly, I'm here to tell you that it's actually not. Today, I want to talk about how to survive a financially hot season, how to recover from it, and how to restart your financial goals again without you losing your faith, your dignity, or yourself in the process. Hi, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Mbali Talks Podcast, the space for women rebuilding their confidence, clarity, and courage, one honest conversation at a time. My name is Mbali, and in this episode, we are talking about how to recover after a bad financial year without losing yourself. Now, before we can talk about rebuilding, let's sit with survival for just a minute, because that part matters more than what we actually are willing to admit. And I want us to normalize something. A financially hard year does not mean you are irresponsible. It does not mean you are incapable, and it definitely does not mean you are behind in life. Sometimes things happen, and it just means you're in a transition. For me, survival looked like cutting down on things I genuinely enjoyed. I stopped going on certain trips. I adjusted why and how often I went out. I reduced expenses that once literally felt normal, like random lunches and trying out a new restaurant every other second day. And I'm not going to lie to you. There's a quiet death that happens to your ego in that process. Because sometimes it's not just about the money. It's about what the money represented. The freedom, the progress, the independence, as well as the access that comes with it. In 2022, I went to Portugal for Afro Nation. And I loved it so much, I promised myself I would go back in a year or two. It felt like one of those I've made it moments. Freedom, travel, the soft life. So when 2024 came around, I bought the event ticket again. But this time, even though I was not ready to say it out loud to myself in that moment, things were slightly different. There was no money lined up for flights, nor was there any accommodation booked ahead of time. And basically, there was no financial cushion for me to play around with. And I realized I had a choice to make. I could stretch myself and dip into my emergency fund to keep appearances with the people I was meant to travel with. And honestly, I considered that option. Not because it was wise, but because if you'd notice, pride is always louder than wisdom. Because there's something deeply uncomfortable about feeling like your life has shifted and everybody else can see it. I remember sitting with that decision for a while and realizing this wasn't about Portugal or the promise I'd made to myself 2 years prior. It was about accepting that my financial season had changed and that I had to adjust with it if I was ever going to have a chance to survive it and or rebuild. And I'm not going to lie, that moment felt absolutely powerless. It felt like I was shrinking myself. Like people could somehow sense I couldn't afford the lifestyle I once moved through so effortlessly. And that anxiety, let me tell you, that anxiety is very heavy. But choosing not to go wasn't failure for me. It honestly felt like it was maturity. And sometimes the most adult decision you can make is the one nobody actually applauds you for. And here's what I learned in that season. Financial humility is uncomfortable, but it protects your future. You can either maintain appearances or maintain stability. And when you're rebuilding, stability must always win. Another thing I had to do was to separate ego from reality, which meant I had to ask myself, am I spending to live or to prove a point to people that were not even in my shoes at the time. Because sometimes when money gets tight, we panic spend in order to feel like we're in control of the situation so that nobody can see what's actually happening. And we do this as a way to protect the perceived respect we feel we have won from our peers, friends, and family. But survival will always require you to be honest with yourself. And here's the truth you may not be aware of. When money is tight, your goal is not expansion. It's protection and it is survival. It's protecting your peace, protecting your essentials, and ultimately protecting your future so that you can survive to see another day. I don't know about you, but in my books, there's no way that doing that is actually seen as weakness. It's actually wisdom. And once you've stabilized, once the panic has settled a little, that's when recovery begins. Recovery begins when the panic ends. Because remember, the previous phase of you actually realizing that you're going through a hard financial year brings a lot of panic with it. But once you're over that, you can actually start your recovery phase. And panic actually ends when you face your truth. In a financially hard year, your truth becomes your numbers. I remember sitting down and actually looking at my finances properly, not just guessing and not just avoiding, but actually looking at them. And I'm not going to lie, it was very hard at first and it actually felt very uncomfortable. But what I like about seeking clarity is the empowerment that comes with it, because the truth is, you cannot fix what you refuse to face. Part of my audit at the time was needing to admit that I was spending too much money on entertainment. And that, given the lifestyle I was used to living, I was not making enough money to sustain it anymore. So I had to cut back. I had to stop the random trips. I had to stop shopping like I made a living out of it. I literally had to dial down on every aspect of my life that I considered the soft life. Because I knew that in order for me to get out of this financial funk, I had to not just live below my means, but to do it as if my life actually depended on it, because it literally did. Shifting from living in abundance to living in scarcity can feel like you're fighting for your life. And you can either learn to swim, or you can continue drowning in your own ignorance just to keep up appearances. So once I started being intentional about which expenses I was willing to spend on and which ones I could sit out, I started feeling a sense of relief from that crippling anxiety we spoke about earlier. I started feeling like I could actually survive this season, like I could almost see the future ahead. And I started feeling like I know that my previous life was not as good as all it could get. There was so much more out there for me. And my determination to survive, correct, and rebuild started getting stronger again. But all that would not have happened had I not been intentional about facing my truth, being honest, and willing to adjust accordingly. Because once I understood where I was, I shifted from making decisions emotionally to making them strategically. That's when I restarted parts of my income differently. That's when I even became more intentional about actually restarting my wig business. I realized I needed to stop thinking about just short-term survival and to start thinking about structured recovery. And here's something important that I learned. Money stress can make you feel smaller than you actually are. It can affect your confidence, your relationships, and especially your faith, because somehow money is always linked to how blessed we think we are. There are moments where I question myself deeply, thinking, did I make the wrong decision? Am I now suddenly going to be behind? Why is this even happening to me now? And this is where faith became the real thing for me. Not the Instagram type of post of faith, not the aesthetic type of faith. I mean grounded faith. Faith that says, I don't understand this season fully, but I trust that God will help me to navigate it. But faith is not passive. Hope without action is denial, and action without hope is exhaustion. Trust me, I know, I have lived this. So you actually need both, faith as well as action. You pray and you plan. You believe and you budget. You trust and you track. That combination changed everything for me. And here's the interesting part. When things slowly start improving, you're tempted to rush back to who you used to be. But rebuilding isn't about going back. It's about building smarter. So what I've learned from this experience is that you need to restart from where you are, not from where you were. Your old financial goals might need adjusting. Maybe timelines shift, maybe the numbers look different, maybe the strategy changes, but the vision itself, the vision can still stand because you are aware of where you actually want to go in your future. When I started rebuilding my financial goals, I had to ask myself, what does financial health look like for me now? Not 2 or 3 years ago when I was doing the trips and living that lifestyle. I had to rebuild from the place that I was at that time. Smaller targets, stronger systems, stronger discipline, and more intention. Because I didn't just want income anymore. I wanted stability, I wanted sustainability, and I ultimately wanted peace. And rebuilding slowly doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're building something that can actually last. If there's one thing I want you to know from today's episode, it's that rebuilding isn't about going back. It's about building smarter. If you've had a financially bad year, or a few years even, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not your worst financial season. And that survival is not regression. It's actually you repositioning yourself so that you can move forward. A hard year can teach you discipline, clarity, humility, as well as faith if you're a believer like me. And sometimes that foundation is way more valuable than fast growth can ever be. This may not be your most glamorous chapter, but it could be your most grounding one. And grounded women actually rebuild much stronger. If this episode spoke to you, please join the Mbali Talks family by hitting that subscribe button, sharing this episode with a woman who can actually use it, and leaving a comment in the comment section, or even dropping me a DM and tell me, where are you now in this process of building your financial goals? I will see you in the next Mbali Talks podcast episode.